In this video, we finally start to work on our Gen 5 5.3 to get it ready to swap into our Land Cruiser.
Stop it, we're not saying that on camera.
In the previous episodes, we restored the interior and pulled out the drivetrain of the Land Cruiser, and now it's finally time for us to head up to Tour Fab in Everett, Washington to get all the hard parts to make this big swap finally work. For those of you who don't know, Tour Fab is basically like Land Cruiser Disneyland. They work on all kinds of Land Cruisers, all makes, all models, US, JDM, etc. They also manufacture their own parts on site. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know about Tour Fab until my buddy Corey told me about them. And they are one of the reasons why I chose to go this direction with the swap. And speaking of the swap, while I was there on site, the owner actually walked me around his own personal 80, which was so cool, with this swap in there. And he showed me everything I needed to do to get everything to work. Yes, it's a big job, but seeing stuff like this in person is quite an inspiration, and I'm so pumped to get this going as soon as I get back home with the parts. Now that we're back, we can see all the components involved in the Tour Fab Gen 5 LT swap kit, and believe it or not, it's pretty simple. You're going to need a later generation 80 series rear transmission extension housing. I stole this from a 105. Shout out to Tour Fab for giving me that. Your factory transmission mount will bolt to that. Tour Fab makes an adapter plate here that takes this later 80 series transmission extension housing, goes to this adapter. This adapter then goes to the GM 8 or 10 speed transmission. There's an extension on the prop shaft here that they make and they machine in-house. Then they make a motor mount kit that bolts to your factory engine mounts and bolts to the Gen 5 LT engine 5360, etc. Then I have my transfer case out here too, because it does retain the factory transfer case and it retains all your drive shafts, and that's the reason why we went this direction. There are other kits out there, like Mark's 4-wheel drive makes a kit that requires some welding and fabrication. There's other kits out there that will bolt in a 2UZ into your Land Cruiser. But the reason why I went with Tour Fab is, one, they're local, and then two, the components aren't so involved. Yes, it's not cheap, but they're high quality, CNC machined. I can get support for whatever I need. The dude wheels. I'm actually in the middle of restoring my speedo sensor housing here, because this is the #1 place that 80 series transfer cases leak, and in doing this repair I actually damaged this unit, so I'm waiting on a new one, yada yada yada. We'll get this all sorted, but I wanted to show you everything that's involved, that's needed for the kit to work, and that's pretty much it. Then the rest is wiring, and we're waiting on that as well. With everything back home, it was time to start the 5.3 teardown, and this engine was a little rough. You could see there was some rust from the headers, on the headers from the engine sitting outside. The spark plug wires didn't want to come off. I also don't know how to remove these things, honestly. I don't know what I'm doing here. But with the headers off, I wanted to inspect each opening and make sure the valves were all good, and they seemed good. The metal seemed good. I got a brand new set of shorty swap headers, so I test fitted those up before I painted them. They were all good. Then I decided to remove the intake manifold to clean up what was going on in the engine. I mean, I just saw it just looked so dirty, and I didn't want any cobwebs and rust or anything in there. As soon as I pulled the manifold off, I started to see some signs of this thing being the home of spiders. As you can see, tons of spider webs on that cover there. And then boom, there we go. Those are active black widows alive underneath that cover. You saw one right there. There was a total of 3. In fact, one made a home inside my alternator, and others made homes inside these spaces in between the intake runners there. So decided to vacuum everything out the best I could and make sure the engine was nice and clean. Then I decided to carefully tape off each hole of the engine because I didn't want anything falling in there. Of course, this is my baby. I got to take care of it. Probably should have done that before I started vacuuming, but whatever. Then after I was done taping off every hole, I decided to move on and clean up more areas of the engine. I mean, it just was looking gross. It looked creepy gross. So I decided to pull off some accessory belts, as you can see here. And those accessories are covered in rust, grossness, grime, dead animal, dead insects. And then I started to hear a buzzing noise, and that's where things got a little creepy. The intake manifold was home to hundreds of mason beehives. And the intake manifold wasn't just the only place that had beehives. There were beehives in every single opening of this engine. You can see there, that's me taking out the dead bee carcasses in all the holes. So I decided, hey, I better clean up everything. And so I cleaned every single hole the best I could on this engine as fast as I could so the bees wouldn't come back. In fact, some of the bees were buzzing around in my head when I was doing some of this work, but I just didn't catch any of it on this camera. With all that nice and cleaned up, it was time to finally focus on making the engine look nicer. Now that we've finally gotten rid of the black widows, the beehives, the insects, the cobwebs, this engine was disgusting. And we can really start to make this engine look pretty. And let me tell you, getting to this point was a trip. One of the things we have to do to make the Gen V LT motor fit or work in a Land Cruiser is we have to adapt the power steering. The vehicle that this engine powers doesn't have your traditional sense of hydraulic power steering, so we have to throw in a Saginaw power steering pump into this engine. And in order to do that, we went with Tejas Steelworks. They make an adapter kit that blocks off some of the provisions of the old hydraulic system, makes a bracket, and then you can throw in kind of an old school style Saginaw power steering pump off the engine. And so this is me putting the pulley on and using all the right tools to make sure that's nice and locked in and centered. And this is the first step in actually making the engine look pretty. Next thing I started to work on was replacing the water pump. This engine only had 17,000 miles, but seeing all the spiders and bees and all that, I figured really good idea just to replace the water pump. So I did. Torqued everything down so that way we wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore, thank goodness. And then I got a new serpentine belt tensioner on there. I didn't want any squeaks. I didn't want any old belts. I wanted everything to be like it was brand new. Threw on the AC compressor bracket and reconditioned the AC compressor. And then threw on the thing I'm most excited about, the Mechman Alternator. We'll get more into that later. I replaced the thermostat with a chrome bit just to make it look a little bit more fancy. And then I moved on to the valve covers. The factory valve covers are totally fine on this engine. They just didn't look cool, and they looked pretty gross. And I wanted to get all the evidence of all the old grossness off. So I got some cheapy Jegs valve covers. You can see me here pulling off the valve cover, and I started to inspect the valves, and they look brand new. They literally look like they came out of a showroom. So fingers crossed they hold up, and I don't have any issues with those. And before I wanted to throw on the new valve covers, I wanted to make sure everything was nice and clean. Every gasket surface was perfect. So I used a microfiber brake cleaner, sandpaper, etc. Time to throw on the all black Johnnies just to make the engine have a little bit more punch, and it was going to match those headers that I painted black. So things are starting to come together. Torqued this down, of course. You can see my torque rating there. Took off the other side as well. I didn't want any more grossness in that engine bay. And the engine is finally starting to come together and look the way that I want it to look. In fact, I could almost say that this thing is starting to look a little bit like a hot rod. now that we got everything all buttoned up, look at how incredible the Mechman Alternator is. Oh my gosh, I've never seen such a prettier alternator in my life. I mean, I'm geeking out over an alternator, but the reason why I went with this alternator is because of, one, it looks incredible on the engine bay, and then two, I'm going to show you here, you can see the amount of amps it's going to put out for us when we're cruising. So 1800 RPM cruise, we're going to be putting out up to 283 amps. 800 RPM idle will put up over 200 amps, and this thing was tested in March of this year. 200 amps at idle is going to be phenomenal. That's the kind of electricity we're looking for when we wire up things like a second battery or chargers or etc., because now we have a ton of power coming through this thing, up to 283 amps at an 1800 RPM cruise to charge up things super fast on the road. So if I run in like a Blue Eddy Charger 1, I can go up to 200 amps and charge my EcoFlow or second batteries or anything like that. I'm so pumped on this silly little alternator. We're at a point now where I'm finally done modifying the engine, or at least cleaning up the engine to the point where I want to go. Now, a lot of people are going to be watching this and say, like, why don't you add a cam, or why don't you do lifter delete or AFM delete? I have to constantly make compromises on this build, because if I don't stop somewhere, I'm going to keep going forever and I won't be able to drive this rig by summer. For example, yeah, I can make a ton of power by adding a cam and then doing a lifter delete or whatever it is for this engine, but that's going to be at least another week's worth of work. It's going to be at least another, I don't know, $600 or $700 in supplies at minimum, and I'm running out of time and I'm running out of budget since this is my only job. So in case you're wondering, you know, why am I kind of cutting corners or not going all the way with this rebuild or this engine teardown, it's just because I constantly have to make compromises. And truthfully, I'm happy with where I'm at. This is a decision that I'm happy that I made. I'm happy where we're at here, and now we can keep moving in the direction of getting this in the rig and getting everything else around this engine to work. Wiring, plumbing, brackets, adapters. I gotta start to make an exhaust too, and I can't make an exhaust unless this is in the rig. So if you're watching and you're seeing me not really go as far as you'd want me to go, it's just because I have to stop at some point. But speaking of stopping, this is a great place for us to stop this episode, because we've done a lot on this engine. Oh my gosh, taking it to where it is now looks totally different than where it started. I'm also happy to report that I'm not being surrounded by mason bees, black widows, spider webs, insects, or of any kind filming this video, which is huge, because when we first got this bad boy, it was gross. That's enough of me ranting. Thanks so much for watching up until this point. The next couple videos are going to be us attempting to put this thing in the rig and then putting all the things around it to make it run. We still have a long way to go. All the fun is in the journey, and I can't wait to see this inside the engine bay. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, grab yourself a Cool Guy Club hat. Those are available on the site. Thanks for all the comments and support, and hopefully we can get this bad boy on the road before summer and head to Moab.